The Aldobrandini family. The Aldobrandini are an Italian noble family from Florence, with close ties to the Vatican. Its Roman fortunes were made when Ippolito Aldobrandini became pope under the name Pope Clement VIII. He arranged the marriage that linked the Aldobrandini with the Roman family of Pamphili. Additionally, they were also linked to marriage alliances with the Farnese. Ranuccio I, Duke of Parma, had married Margherita Aldobrandini, and Borghese, since Olympia Aldobrandini married Paolo Borghese. The family also lends its name to the Palazzo Aldobrandini on the Quirinal Hill. The Aldobrandini family, having reached the height of its powers when Ippolito Aldobrandini became Pope Clement VIII, 1592–1605, began the building of the villa. In 1600 Clement VIII acquired the Orti Vitelli on the Quirinal Hill and in 1601 donated the property to his cardinal nephew Pietro Aldobrandini. The old buildings of the Vitelli family were demolished and construction began on the new villa and adjacent garden. The villa was never the family seat as the Aldobrandini family owned even more splendid residences elsewhere in Rome. The villa on the Quirinal Hill served essentially for ceremonial functions. Escutcheon of the Aldobrandini family. More famous was the Villa Aldobrandini in Frascati. Also known as Belvedere for its charming location overlooking the whole valley up to Rome, it was rebuilt on the order of Cardinal Pietro Aldobrandini over a pre-existing edifice built by the Vatican prelate Alessandro Ruffini in 1550. The villa, aligned with the cathedral down its axial avenue that is continued through the town as Via Alcatone, was rebuilt in the current form by Giacomo della Porto from 1598 to 1602, and then completed by Carlo Maderno and Giovanni Fontana. The villa has an imposing 17th-century facade and some other interesting architectural and environmental features, such as the double gallery order on the rear facade, the spiral-shaped flights, the large exit of the water theater and a magnificent park. Inside there are paintings of Mannerist and Baroque artists such as the Zuccari brothers, Cavaliere d'Arpino and Domenichino. Outside there is a monumental gate by Carlo Francesco Bizzaccheri, early 18th century. The Doria, Pamphilj, Landi and Aldobrandini families have become united through marriage and descent under the simplified surname Doria Pamphilj, which is now extinct since the death of Princess Orietta Doria Pamphilj in 2000. The Aldobrandini family palazzo and its collections of works of art and furnishings is now the Doria Pamphilj Gallery in Rome. The family name lives on, however, via a branch of the Borghese family, descended from the marriage of Olympia Aldobrandini with Prince Paolo Borghese in the 17th century. This line is descended from Don Camillo Borghese, Prince Aldobrandini, 1816–1902, a leading member of the soi-disant Black Nobility, who in turn was the younger brother of the then Prince Borghese and head of that family. Princess Olympia Anna Aldobrandini, also a non-lineal descendant of Napoleon on her mother's side, married into the Rothschild family. 1. The princely family is currently represented by Prince Camillo Aldobrandini, born 1945, whose heir is Don Clemente Aldobrandini, born 1982. 2. Other notable members of the Aldobrandini family are the Villa Aldobrandini in Frascati. Alessandro Cardinal Aldobrandini, 1667–1734, raised to the cardinal at 1730. 3. Bonifacio Bevilacqua Aldobrandini. Ippolito Cardinal Aldobrandini Jr. Silvestro Cardinal Aldobrandini. Cinzio Passeri Cardinal Aldobrandini, a cardinal nephew of Clement VIII. Raised to the cardinal at 1593. Pietro Cardinal Aldobrandini, 1571–1621, raised to the cardinal at 1593 by Clement VIII. The Borgia family. The House of Borgia was an Italo-Spanish noble family, which rose to prominence during the Italian Renaissance. They were from Valentia, the surname being a toponymic from Barria, then in the Crown of Aragon, in Spain. The Borgias became prominent in ecclesiastical and political affairs in the 15th and 16th centuries, producing two popes, Alphonse de Barria, who ruled as Pope Calixtus III during 1455 to 1458, and Rodrigo Lanzo Borgia, as Pope Alexander VI, during 1492 to 1503. Especially during the reign of Alexander VI, they were suspected of many crimes, including adultery, incest, simony, theft, bribery, and murder, especially murder by arsenic poisoning. 1. Because of their grasping for power, they made enemies of the Medici, the Sforza, and the Dominican friar Savonarola, among others. They were also patrons of the arts who contributed to the Renaissance. Early history. The Borgia or Borgia originated in the town of Borgia in the Kingdom of Aragon. There were numerous unsubstantiated claims that the family was of Jewish origin. These underground rumors were propagated by, among others, Giuliano della Rovere, and the family was frequently described as Marranos by political opponents. The rumors have persisted in popular culture for centuries, listed in the Semigota of 1912. 234, the family themselves propagated a spurious genealogical descent from a 12th-century claimant to the crown of the Kingdom of Aragon, Pedro de Tars, Lord of Barria, who actually died childless. Alphonse de Barria, 1378–1458, was born to Francina Lansal and Domingo de Borgia in La Torta, Canals, which was then situated in the Kingdom of Valencia. Alphonse de Borgia was a professor of law at the University of Lleida, then a diplomat for the kings of Aragon before becoming a cardinal. At an advanced age, he was elected Pope Calixtus III in 1455 as a compromise candidate and reigned as pope for just 3 years. Rodrigo Borgia, 1431–1503, was born in Zaitaiva, also in the Kingdom of Valencia, to Isabel de Borgia y Cavanilles and Jauffre Lansal y Escriva. He studied law at Bologna and was appointed as cardinal by his uncle, Alphonse Borgia, Pope Calixtus III. He was elected pope in 1492, taking the regnal name Alexander VI. While a cardinal, he maintained a long-term illicit relationship with Vanessa de Catani, with whom he had 4 children, Giovanni, Cesar, Lucrezia, and Jauffre. Rodrigo also had children by other women, including one daughter with his mistress, Julia Farnese. As Alexander VI, Rodrigo was recognized as a skilled politician and diplomat, but was widely criticized during his reign for his overspending, sale of church offices, simony, lasciviousness, and nepotism. As pope, he struggled to acquire more personal and papal power and wealth, often ennobling and enriching the Borgia family directly. He appointed his son, Giovanni, as captain general of the papal army, his foremost military representative, and established another son, Cesar, as a cardinal. Alexander used the marriages of his children to build alliances with powerful families in Italy and Spain. At the time, the Sforza family, which comprised the Milanese faction, was one of the most powerful in Europe, so Alexander united the two families by marrying Lucrezia to Giovanni Sforza. He also married Jauffre, his youngest son from Vanessa, to Sancha of Aragon of the Crown of Aragon and Naples. He established a second familial link to the Spanish royal house through Giovanni's marriage during what was a period of on-again/off-again conflict between France and Spain over the Kingdom of Naples. It is reported that under Alexander VI's rule the Borgia hosted orgies in the Vatican Palace. The Banquet of Chestnuts is considered one of the most disreputable balls of this kind. Johann Burchard reports that 50 courtesans were in attendance for the entertainment of the banquet guests. 6. It is alleged not only was the Pope present, but also 2 of his children, Lucrezia and Cesar. Other researchers however, such as Monsignor Peter de Roo, 1839–1926, have rejected the rumors of the 50 courtesans as being at odds with Alexander VI's essentially decent but much maligned character. 7. Pope Alexander VI died in Rome in 1503 after contracting a disease, generally believed to have been malaria. Two of Alexander's successors, Sixtus V and Urban VIII, described him as one of the most outstanding popes since St. Peter. Cesare was Rodrigo Borgia's second son with Vanessa di Catania. Cesare's education was precisely planned by his father. He was educated by tutors in Rome until his 12th birthday. He grew up to become a charming man skilled at war and politics. 9. He studied law and the humanities at the University of Perugia, then went to the University of Pisa to study theology. As soon as he graduated from the university, his father made him a cardinal. Cesare was suspected of murdering his brother Giovanni, but there is no clear evidence to confirm this. However, Giovanni's death cleared the path for Cesare to become a layman and gain the honors his brother received from their father, Pope Alexander VI. 10. Although Cesare had been a cardinal, he left the holy orders to gain power and take over the position Giovanni once held, a condottiero. He was finally married to French Princess Charlotte d'Albret. After Alexander's death in 1503, Cesare effected the choice of a next pope. He needed a candidate who would not threaten his plans to create his own principality in central Italy. Cesare's candidate, Pius III, did become pope, but he died a month after this election. Cesare was then forced to support Giuliano della Rovere. The cardinal promised Cesare that he could keep all of his titles and honors. Later, della Rovere betrayed him and became his fiercest enemy. Cesare died in 1507, at Viana Castle in Navarre, Spain, while besieging the rebellious army of Count de Lérine. The castle was held by Louis de Beaumont at the time it was besieged by Cesare Borgia and King John's army of 10,000 men in 1507. In order to attempt to breach the extremely strong, natural fortification of the castle, Cesare counted on a desperate surprise attack. He was killed during the battle, in which his army failed to take the castle. Lucrezia was born in Subiaco, Italy to Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia and Roman mistress Vanessa di Catania. Before the age of 13, she was engaged to two Spanish princes. After her father became pope she was married to Giovanni Sforza in 1493 at the age of 13. It was a typical political marriage to improve Alexander's power. However, when Pope Alexander VI no longer needed the Sforzas, the marriage was annulled in 1497 on the dubious grounds that it had never been consummated. Shortly afterwards she was involved in a scandal involving her alleged relationship with a Pedro Calderón, a Spaniard generally known as Pirato. His body was found in the Tiber on February 14, 1498, along with the body of one of Lucrezia's ladies. It is likely that Cesare had them killed as an affair would have damaged the negotiations being conducted for another marriage. During this time rumors were also spread suggesting that a child born at this time, Giovanni Borgia, also known as the Infans Romanus, child of Rome, was Lucrezia's. 11. Lucrezia's second marriage, to wealthy young Prince Alfonso of Aragon, allowed the Borgias to form an alliance with another powerful family. However, this relationship did not last long either. Cesare wished to strengthen his relations with France and completely break with the Kingdom of Naples. As Alfonso's father was the ruler of the Kingdom of Naples, the young husband was in great danger. Although the first attempt at murder did not succeed, Alfonso was eventually strangled in his own quarters. Lucrezia's third and final husband was Alfonso I d'Este, Duke of Ferrara. After her father died in 1503, she lived a life of freedom in Ferrara with her husband and children. 12. Unfortunately, her pregnancies were difficult and she lost several babies after birth. She died in 1519, 10 days after the birth and death of her last child, Isabella Maria. She was buried in a tomb with Isabella and Alfonso. Lucrezia was rumored to be a notorious poisoner, and she became famous for her skill at political intrigue. However, recently historians have started to look at her in a more sympathetic light. She is often seen as a victim of her family's deceptions. The Breakspear family. There was no ethical article found about this family. Hence the following is a different kind of article about them. So folks, why haven't you heard of this family? Maybe someone wants to keep it quiet for some reason? But you know of Rothschilds, right? Why is this exactly? Take a look at this powerful Luciferian family. What's their connection to the Jesuits? Do the math. I don't remember Bloodline Crazy Intelligentsia, David speaking about them, do you? This folks is the Breakspear family. It's a secret occult family, who have had some members live to ripe ages of 500 years old. They're one of the unknown historic elite families on Earth. They are pharaohs. Breakspear is a riddle when it is translated into Latin, because it translates to Breakspear equals Lancerato equals Lancerata equals Launcelota equals Lancelot. Lancelot is the first knight to King Arthur. Pope Hadrian IV, killer of Arnold the Reformist, is Lancelot. His name was anglicized and retranslated to hide its origins. One of the evilest popes ever to have lived. Bloodthirsty. And now the whole world is worshipping Sir Lancelot as a hero, when his origins are of a mass murderer. Breakspear is Lancelot, no matter what the masses say. It was the Breakspear family that destroyed your country of England. Even Shakespeare was a Breakspear. There's an ancient ritual going back even to the Sumerian times called the breaking of spears. There is the Spear of Destiny. We're talking about the only family that controls Britain, from the shadows. The whole royal family are nonsense. They are the Vales. The Breakspears are Jesuits. They're the high priests. They practice ritual black magic and of course human blood sacrifices. They have intercourse with the dead as well. Usually a female which comes back to life for a few minutes and dies again. Pope Hadrian IV. Pope Hadrian IV circa 1100 of September, 1159 AD 1, born Nicholas Breakspear or Breakspear, was pope from 1154 to 1159 AD. Adrian IV is the only Englishman who has occupied the papal chair. It is generally believed that Nicholas Breakspear was born at Breakspear Farm in the parish of Abbots Langley in Hertfordshire and received his early education at the Abbey School, St. Albans School. Pope Hadrian IV. Nicholas Breakspear. Pope Hadrian IV. The Merovingian kings were noted sorcerers in the manner of the Samaritan Magi, and they firmly believed in the hidden powers of the honeycomb. Because a honeycomb is naturally made up of hexagonal prisms, it was considered by philosophers to be the manifestation of divine harmony in nature. Its construction was associated with insight and wisdom, as detailed in Proverbs 24:13-14, "My son, eat thou honey, because it is good. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be unto thy soul." To the Merovingians, the bee was a most hallowed creature. A sacred emblem of Egyptian royalty, it became a symbol of wisdom. Some 300 small golden bees were found stitched to the cloak of Childeric, son of Merovis, when his grave was unearthed in 1653. Napoleon had these attached to his own coronation robe in 1804. He claimed this right by virtue of his descent from James de Rohan Stuardo, the natural son, legitimized in 1667, of Charles II Stuart of Britain by Marguerite, Duchess de Rohan. The Stuarts in turn were entitled to this distinction because they, and their related counts of Brittany, were descended from Clodion's brother Friedemundus. Thus, akin to the Merovingians, they were equally in descent from the Fisher kings through Pharamond. The Merovingian bee was adopted by the exiled Stuarts in Europe, and engraved bees are still to be seen on some Jacobite glassware. From Bloodline of the Holy Grail by Lawrence Gardner, the Chigai family. The Chigai family is a Roman princely family of Sina's extraction descended from the Counts of Ardensca, too, which possessed castles in the Maremma, southern Tuscany. The earliest authentic mention of them is in the 13th century, with one Alemanno, councillor of the Republic of Sina. History. The first very prominent member was Mariano, 1439–1504, a banker and 2 times ambassador of Siena to the popes Alexander VI and Julius II. He founded the Roman branch of the family. The other branch was started by his brother, Benedetto. Agostino Chigai, 1465–1520, was the most famous member of the family during the Renaissance. 2. He became an immensely rich banker, and built the palace and gardens afterwards known as the Farnesina, decorated by Raphael, and was noted for the splendor of his entertainments. 2. Pope Julius II made him practically his finance minister and gave him the privilege of quartering his own, della Rovere, arms with those of the Chigai. 2. Cardinal Fabio Chigai, on being elected pope as Alexander VII at the conclave of 1655, conferred the Roman patriciate on his family. 2. His elder brother Mario, last commander of the Corsican guarding Rome, continued the branch of the family in Siena. His brother Augusto continued the line in Rome. Augusto's son Agostino was made Reichsfürst, Prince of the Holy Roman Empire, by Leopold I in 1659. Agostino married Maria Virginia Borghese, relative of the Borghese Pope, and acquired the Principates of Farnese, 1658, Campagnano, 1661, and Aricia, where a famous palazzo bearing the family name still exists. The Pope also had 2 nephews who became cardinals, Flavio I, who was his cardinal nephew and one of the main art collectors of the family and built the Villa Settimile in 1680, and Sigismondo. In 1712, Prince Augusto, son of Prince Agostino, received the dignity of hereditary marshals of the Roman Catholic Church and guardians of the conclaves, which gave them a prominent ceremonial importance on the death of every pope. 2. During the 18th century, Flavio II became cardinal. On the marriage in 1735 of another Agostino Chigai, 1710–1769, with Giulia Albani, heiress of the Albani, of Venetian patrician family, said to be of Albanian origin, her name was added to that of Chigai. 2. Prince Sigismondo Chigai Albani della Rovere, August 24, 1798, May 10, 1877, Prince of Campagnano, had a son, Don Mario Chigai, and 4 daughters, Teresa, who married Giulio, Duca di Torlonia, Maria, who married Prince Giuseppe Giovanelli, Angiola, who married Count Fabio Benacursi, and Virginia, who married Marchese Galzo Guidi. Prince Sigismondo's brother, Flavio III, 1810–1885, became a cardinal on December 22, 1873 with the title of Santa Maria del Popolo. He had been nuncio to France in the 1860s. Prince Mario Chigai Albani della Rovere succeeded his father in 1877 and served as Marshal of the Holy Roman Church at the conclave of 1878. He married Antonietta, the daughter of Prince Louis of St. Wittgenstein-Sayn in 1857. They had 3 children, Agostino, Ludovico, Luigi, and Eleonora. Prince Ludovico Chigai Albani della Rovere, July 10, 1866, November 14, 1951, son of Prince Mario and Antoinette, was Grand Master of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta from 1931 to 1951. In 1893 he married Donna Anna Aldobrandini, Princess of Sarsina. They had 3 children, Sigismondo, Petro, and Laura. Prince Ludovico was Marshal of both the conclave of 1922 and that of 1939. Prince Sigismondo Chigai, 1894–1982, hereditary Marshal of the Holy Roman Church, was the son of Prince Ludovico Chigai Albani della Rovere, 1866–1951, and Donna Anna Aldobrandini, Princess of Sarsina. He had one son, Don Agostino Chigai Albani della Rovere, 1929–2002, and one daughter, Princess Francesca. He was the Marshal of the Conclave both in 1958 and 1963. The office, to which the Chigai had succeeded after the extinction of the Savli in 1712, was abolished by Pope Paul VI in a motu proprio, Pontificalis Domus, of March 28, 1968. The family owns large estates at Siena. The family palace on the Via del Corso in Rome is currently seat of the Italian government. Another Palazzo Chigai in Arisha is now a museum and site for meetings. The family's mausoleum is in the Chigai Chapel of the Basilica of Santa Maria del Popolo, in Rome, the work of Raphael and Gianlorenzo Bernini. The princely family is represented by Prince Mario Chigai Albani della Rovere, Prince of Farnese, born 1929, whose heir is Prince Flavio Chigai Albani della Rovere. The Colonna family. The Colonna family, also known as Ciarillo or Ciara, is an Italian noble family. It was powerful in medieval and Renaissance Rome, supplying one pope and many other church and political leaders. The family is notable for its bitter feud with the Orsini family over influence in Rome, until it was stopped by papal bull in 1511. In 1571, the heads of both families married nieces of Pope Sixtus V. Thereafter, historians recorded that no peace had been concluded between the princes of Christendom, in which they had not been included by name. Origins edit. According to tradition, the Colonna are a branch of the Counts of Tusculum, by Peter, 1099–1151, son of Gregory III, called Peter de Colomna from his property the Colomna Castle in Colonna, Alban Hills. Even far further back, they trace their lineage past the Counts of Tusculum via Lombard and Italo-Roman nobles, merchants, and clergy through the early Middle Ages, ultimately claiming origins from the Julio-Claudian dynasty. The first cardinal from the family was appointed in 1206 when Giovanni Colonna di Carbagnano was made cardinal deacon of SS. Cosma e Damiano. 3. For many years, Cardinal Giovanni di San Paolo, elevated in 1193, was identified as member of the Colonna family and therefore its first representative in the College of Cardinals. But modern scholars have established that this was based on the false information from the beginning of 16th century. 4. Giovanni Colonna, 1260. 5. Nephew of Cardinal Giovanni Colonna di Carbagnano, made his solemn vows as a Dominican circa 1228 and received his theological and philosophical training at the Roman Studium of Santa Sabina, the forerunner of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, Angelicum. He served as the provincial of the Roman province of the Dominican order and led the provincial chapter of 1248 at Anagni. 6. Colonna was appointed as Archbishop of Messina in 1255. 7. In 1248, after having dedicated her entire life to serving God and the poor, Margherita Colonna died. A member of the Franciscan order, she was beatified by Pope Pius IX in 1848. At this time a rivalry began with the pro-papal Orsini family, leaders of the Guelph faction. This reinforced the pro-Emperor Ghibelline course that the Colonna family followed throughout the period of conflict between the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire. Colonna vs. Papacy edit. In 1297, Cardinal Giacomo Colonna, disinherited his brothers Otto, Matteo, and Landolfo of their lands. The latter three appealed to Pope Boniface VIII who ordered Jacopo to return the land, and furthermore hand over the family's strongholds of Colonna, Palestrina, and other towns to the papacy. Jacopo refused. In May, Boniface removed him from the College of Cardinals and excommunicated him and his followers. The Colonna family, aside from the three brothers allied with the Pope, declared that Boniface had been elected illegally following the unprecedented abdication of Pope Celestine V. The dispute led to open warfare, and in September Boniface appointed Landolfo to the command of his army, to put down the revolt of Landolfo's own Colonna relatives. By the end of 1298 Landolfo had captured Colonna, Palestrina and other towns and razed them to the ground. The family's lands were distributed among Landolfo and his loyal brothers. The rest of the family fled Italy. The exiled Colonna allied with the Pope's other great enemy, Philip IV of France, who in his youth had been tutored by Cardinal Egidio Colonna. In September 1303, Ciara and Philip's advisor, Guillaume de Nogret, led a small force into Anagni to arrest of Boniface VIII and bring him to France, where was to stand trial. While the two managed to apprehend the Pope and Ciara reportedly slapped the Pope in the face in the process, which was accordingly dubbed the outrage of Anagni. The attempt eventually failed after a few days, when locals freed the Pope. However, Boniface VIII died on 11th of October, allowing France to dominate his weaker successors during the Avignon papacy. Late Middle Ages edit. The family remained at the center of civic and religious life throughout the late Middle Ages. Cardinal Egidio Colonna died at the papal court in Avignon in 1314. An Augustinian, he had studied theology in Paris under St. Thomas of Aquinas to become one of the most authoritative thinkers of his time. In the 14th century, the family sponsored the decoration of the Church of San Giovanni, most notably the floor mosaics. In 1328, Louis IV of Germany marched into Italy for his coronation as Holy Roman Emperor. As Pope John XXII was residing in Avignon and had publicly declared that he would not crown Louis, the king decided to be crowned by a member of the Roman aristocracy, who proposed Ciara Colonna. In honor of this event, the Colonna family was granted the privilege of using the imperial pointed crown on top of their coat of arms. The celebrated poet Petrarch was a great friend of the family, in particular of Giovanni Colonna, and often lived in Rome as a guest of the family. He composed a number of sonnets for special occasions within the Colonna family, including Colonna the Glorious, the great Latin name upon which all our hopes rest. In this period, the Colonna started claiming they were descendants of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Palazzo Colonna, Rome, begun by Pope Martin V, to this day residence of the family. At the Council of Constance, the Colonna finally succeeded in their papal ambitions when Adon Colonna was elected on November 14, 1417. As Martin V, he reigned until his death on February 20, 1431. Early Modern Period edit. Vittorio Colonna became famous in the 16th century as a poet and a figure in literate circles. In 1627 Anna Colonna, daughter of Filippo I Colonna, married Taddeo Barberini of the family Barberini, nephew of Pope Urban VIII. In 1728, the Carbagnano branch, Colonna di Ciara, of the Colonna family added the name Barberini to its family name 8, when Giulio Cesare Colonna di Ciara married Cornelia Barberini, daughter of the last male Barberini to hold the name and granddaughter of Maffeo Barberini, son of Taddeo Barberini. Current status edit. The Colonna family have been prince assistants to the papal throne 9, since 1710, though their papal princely title only dates from 1854. The family residence in Rome, the Palazzo Colonna, is open to the public every Saturday morning. The main Colonna di Paliano family is represented today by Prince Marcantonio Colonna di Paliano, Prince and Duke of Paliano, born 1948, whose heir is Don Giovanni Andrea Colonna di Paliano, born 1975, and by Don Prospero Colonna di Paliano, Prince of Avella, born 1956, whose heir is Don Filippo Colonna di Paliano. The Colonna di Stigliano line is represented by Don Prospero Colonna di Stigliano, Prince of Stigliano, whose heir is his nephew Don Stefano Colonna di Stigliano. The Conti family. The Conti di Segni, de Commentibus, also known as Conti or de Commentibus for short, were an important noble family of medieval and early modern Italy originating in Segni, Lazio. Many members of the family acted as military commanders or ecclesiastical dignitaries, including many cardinals and 4 popes. The family is on historical record beginning with Trasimendo, the father of Lotario Conti, who became Pope Innocent III in 1198. The second Conti pope was Ugolino, 1227–1241, as Gregory IX, the third Rinaldo, as Alexander IV, r. 1254–1261. Medieval to Renaissance-era cardinals of the family include Giovanni de' Conti di Segni, Niccolò de' Conti di Segni, Ottaviano di Paoli, Giovanni Conti, d. 1493, and Francesco Conti, d. 1521. In medieval Rome, both the Torre de' Conti, built in 1238, and the Torre del Milazzi, testified to the feudal power of the family. In the early modern period, Michelangelo Conti reigned as Pope Innocent XIII from 1721 to 1724. Torquato Conti, 1591 to 1636, served as a general field marshal of the Holy Roman Empire during the 30 Years' War, where his cruelty earned him the nickname the Devil. The family became divided into numerous branches, the principal of which were the Counts of Segni and Valmontone, and the Dukes of Poli and Guadagnolo, cf. House of Torlonia. The former branch was extinct with Donna Fulvia, died 1611, who had married the Counts Forza of Santa Fora. The latter branch gave rise to the Colonna family, of which Pope Martin V was a member, before becoming extinct in its turn. In 1808, the Este family. The House of Este, Italian, Casa d'Este, originally House of Welfest, is a European princely dynasty. The elder branch of the House of Este included the Dukes of Brunswick and Lüneburg and produced Britain's Hanoverian monarchs, as well as one Emperor of Russia, Ivan VI. The younger branch of the House of Este included rulers of Ferrara, 1240 to 1597, and of Modena and Reggio, 1288 to 1796. Origins edit. According to Edward Gibbon, the family originated from the Roman Nati family, which migrated from Rome to Este to defend Italy against the Ostrogoths. However, there is little evidence to support this hypothesis. The names of the early members of the family indicate that a Frankish origin is much more likely. The first known member of the house was Margrave Albert of Mainz, known only as the father of Alberto I, Count Palatine of Italy, who died around 975. Alberto's grandson, Albert Ezzo II, Margrave of Milan, 996–1097, built a castle at Este, near Padua, and named himself after the location. He had 3 sons from 2 marriages, 2 of whom became the ancestors of the 2 branches of the family. Welf IV, the eldest, d. 1101, was the son of Kunigund, d. 1056, the last of the elder Welfs. He inherited the property of his maternal uncle, Welf, Duke of Carinthia, became Duke of Bavaria in 1070, and is the ancestor of the elder branch, the House of Welf. Issue of Atzo's second marriage to Garsend of Maine, inherited the French county of Maine, a legacy of his mother's dowry, but sold it 1 year later and died without heirs. Fulco I, Margrave of Milan, d. about 1128–35, the third son, is the ancestor of the younger Italian line of Este. The two surviving branches, with Duke Henry the Lion of Saxony and Bavaria on the German, Welf dynasty, side, concluded an agreement in 1154 which allocated the family's Italian possessions to the younger line, the Folchest, who in the course of time acquired Ferrara, Modena, and Reggio. Este itself was taken over in 1275 by Padua, and in 1405, together with Padua, by Venice. Elder Branch, Galf, Electors of Hanover edit. Main article, House of Welf. George I, by the grace of God, of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, Prince-Elector of Hanover, Duke of Brunswick. Portrait circa 1714, the year of his accession, by Sir Godfrey Kneller. The elder branch of the House of Este, the House of Welf, historically rendered as Gelf in English, produced Dukes of Bavaria, 1070 to 1139, 1156 to 1180, Dukes of Saxony, 1138 to 1139, 1142 to 1180, a German king, 1198 to 1218, and the Dukes of Brunswick and Lüneburg, 1208 to 1918, who were later styled the Electors of Hanover when the two branches of the family recombined in 1705. After the peace ending the Napoleonic Wars reshaped Europe, ushering in the modern era, the Electorate of Hanover, Duchy of Brunswick and Lüneburg, held in personal union by the King of Great Britain, George III, was dissolved by treaty. Its lands were enlarged and the state was promoted to a kingdom. The new kingdom existed from 1815 to 1866, but upon the accession of Queen Victoria, who could not inherit Hanover under Salic law, in 1837, it passed to her uncle, Ernest Augustus I of Hanover, and thus ceased to be in personal union with the British crown. The House of Este gave Great Britain and the United Kingdom the Hanoverian monarchs, 1714 to 1901. Younger branch, the Margraves of Este edit. All later generations of the Italian branch are descendants of Folco d'Este. From 1171 on, his descendants were titled Margraves of Este. Obizzo I, d. 1193, the first Margrave, battled against Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa. His nephew Azzo d'Este vi, 1170–1212, became Podesta of Mantua and Verona. As the dowry of his niece the Marcella, Ferrara passed to Azzo vi d'Este in 1146, with the last of the Alberti. In 1242 Azzo VII Novella was nominated Podesta for his lifetime. The lordship of Ferrara was made hereditary by Obizzo II, d. 1293, who was proclaimed Lord of Ferrara in 1264, Lord of Modena in 1288, and Lord of Reggio in 1289. Ferrara was a papal fief and the Este family were given the position of hereditary papal vicars in 1332. Ferrara became a significant center of culture under Niccolò d'Este III, 1384–1441, who received several popes with great magnificence, especially Eugene IV. He held a council in Ferrara in 1438, later known as the Council of Florence. His successors were his brothers Leono, 1407–1450, and Borso, 1413–1471, who was elevated to Duke of Modena and Reggio by Emperor Frederick III in 1452, receiving these duchies as imperial fiefs. In 1471, he received the Duchy of Ferrara as papal fief from Pope Paul II, for which occasion splendid frescoes were executed at Palazzo Safenoia. Borso was succeeded by a half-brother, Ercole, 1431–1505, who was one of the most significant patrons of the arts in late 15th and early 16th century Italy. Ferrara grew into a cultural center renowned especially for music. Josquin des Prez worked for Duke Ercole, Jacob Obricht came to Ferrara twice, and Antoine Brumel served as principal musician from 1505. Ercole's daughter Beatrice, 1475–1497, married Ludovico Sforza, Duke of Milan, another daughter, Isabella, 1474–1539, married Francesco Gonzaga, Marquis of Mantua. Ercoli's successor was his son Alfonso I, 1476–1534, third husband of Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, sister to Cesare Borgia. Alfonso I was a patron of Ariosto. The son of Alfonso and Lucrezia Borgia, Ercole d'Este II, 1508–1559, married Renée of France, daughter of Louis XII of France. His son Alfonso II first married Lucrezia, daughter of Grand Duke Cosimo I of Tuscany. After she died, he married Barbara, the sister of Maximilian II, Holy Roman Emperor, 1527–1576. His third wife, Margherita Gonzaga, was daughter of the Duke of Mantua. Ercole raised the glory of Ferrara to its highest point, continuing the patron of Torquato Tasso and Giovanni Battista Guarini, and in general favoring the arts and sciences, as the princes of his house had always done. The legitimate line ended in 1597 with him, as his heir. Emperor Rudolph II recognized his first cousin Cesare d'Este, 1533–1628, member of a cadet branch born out of wedlock, who continued to rule in the imperial duchies and carried on the family name. Ferrara, on the other hand, was annexed by force of arms in 1598 by Pope Clement VIII on grounds of the heir's illegitimacy and incorporated into the Papal States. The last duke, Ercole III, was deposed in 1796 by the French. His two duchies became the Cispadane Republic, which 1 year later was merged into the Cisalpine Republic and then into the Napoleonic Kingdom of Italy. Ercole was compensated in 1801 with the small Principality of Brisgay in southwestern Germany, whose previous rulers, the Habsburgs, ceded it to him in anticipation of its eventual return to the Habsburgs, since Ercole's daughter Maria Beatrice Richelieu d'Este was married to a cadet Habsburg, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Este. Ercole died in 1803 and Brisgay passed to his daughter and her husband, who in 1806 lost it during the Napoleonic reorganization of the western territories of the defunct Holy Roman Empire to the enlarged and elevated Grand Duchy of Baden. Austria-Este and the House of Habsburg. In 1814, when French rule in Italy ended, Modena was returned to the daughter of the deceased Duke Ercole, Mary Beatrice, and her son, Archduke Francis of Austria-Este. The family thus again ruled the Duchy of Modena and Reggio from 1814 to 1859, using the names Habsburgo-Este, Habsburg-Este, and Austria-Este. In 1859, the duchy lost its independence to the new United Italy, and Francis V, Duke of Modena, was deposed. The family of Austria-Este became extinct in the male line with the death of Francis V in 1875. His blood heiress was his niece, Archduchess Maria Theresia of Austria-Este, d. 1919. She and her husband, Prince Louis of Bavaria, later became Queen and King of Bavaria. The present head of this branch of the family is Franz, Duke of Bavaria. However, Francis V had decided to retain the Este name in the Habsburg-Lorraine family and willed his inheritance to the line of Archduke Charles Louis, younger brother of Emperor Francis Joseph, on condition that the heir use the name of Austria-Este. The first adoptee was Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, born 1863, not descended from Maria Beatrice Richelieu d'Este, who took the name of Austria-Este and in 1896 became the heir presumptive of the Habsburg Empire, but was murdered on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo. Since his own children were born in a morganatic marriage to Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, the Habsburgs designated his soon-to-be-born great-nephew Robert, 1915–1996, second son of the future Emperor Charles I of Austria, as the next adopted Austria-Este. through his mother Zita of Bourbon-Parma, a great-granddaughter of Maria Theresa of Savoy, Duchess of Lucca and Parma, who was a daughter of Maria Theresa of Austria-Este, Queen of Sardinia, who in turn was a daughter of Maria Beatrice Richelieu d'Este and Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Este. Robert was a descendant of Ercole III d'Este, and the bloodline of the last Este dukes was thus again joined with the name of Austria-Este. Today, the bearer of this tradition is the eldest son of Archduke Robert of Austria-Este, 1915 to 1996, Lawrence Otto Charles of Austria-Este, born 1955. He is married to Princess Astrid of Belgium, the only daughter of King Albert II. In 1995, Lawrence received the additional title of Prince of Belgium. Since 1991, the couple's children are titled. International format: Princess of Belgium, Archduke, Archduchess, of Austria-Este, Princess Royal of Hungary and Bohemia. Belgian format: Princess of Belgium, Archduke, Archduchess, of Austria-Este, Habsburg-Lorraine. The eldest of their children is Prince Amadeo of Belgium, Archduke of Austria-Este, born 1986. The Farnese family was an influential family in Renaissance Italy. The titles of Duke of Parma and Piacenza and Duke of Castro were held by various members of the family. Its most important members included Pope Paul III, Alessandro Farnese, a cardinal, Alexander Farnese, Duke of Parma, a military commander and governor of the Spanish Netherlands, and Elizabeth Farnese, who became Queen of Spain and whose legacy was brought to her Bourbon descendants. A number of important architectural works and antiquities are associated with the Farnese family, either through construction or acquisition. Buildings include the Palazzo Farnese in Rome and the Villa Farnese at Caprarola, and ancient artifacts include the Farnese marbles. Origins. The family could trace its origins back to around AD 984 and took its name from one of its oldest feudal possessions, Castrum Farnetae. There has been some debate as to the origins of the name Farnese, Farnese. Some suggest that it derives from the vernacular name for an oak found in the region, the Farnia, Quercus robur, but others have held that the name owes its origins to the Fara, a term of Lombard origin used to denote a particular social group. In the 12th century, they are recorded as minor feudatories in the areas of Tuscania and Orvieto, several members holding political positions in the latter commune. One Pietro defeated the Tuscan Ghibellines in 1110 and, most likely, fought against the Italo-Normans in 1134. His son Prudenzio was consul in Orvieto and defeated the Orvieto Ghibellines backed by Siena. Another Pietro defended the town against Emperor Henry VI. In 1254, one Ranuccio defeated Todi's troops and fought for Pope Urban IV against Manfred of Sicily. His son Niccolo was in the Guelph army in the Battle of Benevento, 1266. The Farnese returned to Tussa, southern Tuscany, northern Lazio, in 1319, when they acquired Farnese, Ischia di Castro, and the castles of Sala and San Savino. In 1354, Cardinal Albornoz, in return for the family's help in the war against the papal rightists barons, gave them the territory of Valentano. In this period they fought against the fierce papal rivals, the Prefetti di Vico. In 1362, Pietro Farnese was commander-in-chief of the Florentine army against Pisa in the War for Volterra. 6 years later Niccolo Farnese saved Pope Urban V from the attack of Giovanni di Vico, first in the castle of Viterbo and then in that of Montefiascone. The loyalty to the papal cause meant that the Farnese were granted confirmation of their possessions in the northern Lazio and given a series of privileges which raised them to the same level as more ancient and powerful Roman barons of the time, such as the Savli, Orsini, Monaldeschi and Sforza of Santa Fora. Rise. The family substantially increased its power in the course of the 15th century, as their territories reached the southern shore of the Lake Bolsena and Montalto, largely due to Ranuscio the Elder. He was commander-in-chief of the forces of neighboring Siena against the Orsini of Pitigliano and, after his victory, received the title of Senator of Rome. His son, Gabriele Francesco, also took up a military career, a line of employment which disappeared after 3 generations. Ranuscio's son, Pierluigi, married a member of the ancient baronial family of the Chitini, then of Pope Boniface VIII, thus giving the Farnese further importance in Rome. His daughter, Giulia, who was a mistress of Pope Alexander VI, further expanded the Roman fortunes of her family by persuading the Pope to bestow on her brother Alessandro the title of cardinal. Under Alexander's successor, Pope Julius II, he became governor of the Marca Ancanitina and, in 1534, he was elected as pope and took the name of Paul III. Notable features of his reign included the establishment of the Council of Trent and an unprecedented level of nepotism. For example, 2 months after becoming pope in 1534, he made his 14-year-old grandson Alessandro a cardinal deacon. Paul III died in 1549 and his political role in the Curia passed to his grandson Alessandro, who remained an influential cardinal and patron of the arts until his death in 1589. Rule in Castro and Emilia. Paul III used his position as pontiff to increase the power and possessions of his family. He gave his illegitimate son, Pierluigi, the title of Gonfaloniere or Gonfalone of the Church. He also gave him the town of Castro with the title of Duke of Castro, granting him possession of lands from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Lake of Bolsena, as well as the area of Ronciglione and many other smaller fiefdoms. In 1545, Paul handed over, from land once belonging to the Papal States, further territories in northern Italy to his son, who took the additional title of Duke of Parma. Paul thus established his family as an Italian ducal dynasty, a project at which the Borgia Pope Alexander VI had failed. 2 years later, Pierluigi was assassinated by his new subjects under a Spanish mandate. Despite intrigues by Charles V, the Pope reacted promptly and soon established Ottavio, Pierluigi's son, on the ducal throne. He secured this by marrying Ottavio, 1547–86, to the eldest illegitimate daughter of Charles V, Margaret. Ottavio was given the additional title of Duke of Piacenza and initially established his court there, where work was begun on a huge Farnese palace on the banks of the River Po. However, during construction, and probably in response to political intrigues by the Piacentine nobility, Ottavio Farnese moved his court to Parma, where he had the Palazzo della Bilotta constructed in 1583. In 1580, Ranuscio I was first in the succession line to the Kingdom of Portugal. His great-uncle Henry I of Portugal's death triggered the struggle for the throne of Portugal when Ranuscio was 11 years old. As the son of the late elder daughter of Infante Edward, 4th Duke of Guimarães, the only son of King Manuel I whose legitimate descendants survived at that time, Ranuscio was according to the succession law the first heir to the throne of Portugal. However, his father was an ally and even a subject of the Spanish king, another contender, so Ranuscio's rights were not very forcibly claimed. The Farnese court in Parma and Piacenza under Duke Ranuscio II, 1630–94, was one of the most splendid in Italy. The Duchy of Parma and Piacenza continued to be ruled by the Farnese until the 17th century. However, the city of Castro was removed from the Farnese family holdings when the Farnese fell out with the Barberini family of Pope Urban VIII, sparking the Wars of Castro. In 1649, the conflict ended when Pope Innocent X had the city razed. 1. The small dukedom eventually fell under Spanish control and influence. The family lost Parma and Piacenza in 1731 when the last Farnese duke, Antonio Farnese, died without direct heirs. His collateral heir, his niece Elizabeth Farnese, Queen of Spain, passed a successful claim on to her sons, Don Carlos, later King Carlos III of Spain, and Filippo, who established the House of Bourbon-Parma. The Medici family. The House of Medici was an Italian banking family and political dynasty that first began to gather prominence under Cosimo de' Medici in the Republic of Florence during the first half of the 15th century. The family originated in the Mugello region of Tuscany and prospered gradually until it was able to fund the Medici Bank. This bank was the largest in Europe during the 15th century, and it facilitated the Medici's rise to political power in Florence, though officially they remained citizens rather than monarchs until the 16th century. The Medici produced three popes of the Catholic Church: Pope Leo X, 1513–1521, Pope Clement VII, 1523–1534, and Pope Leo XI, 1605–2, and two regent queens of France, Catherine de' Medici, 1547–1559, and Marie de' Medici, 1600–1610. In 1532, the family acquired the hereditary title Dukes of Florence. In 1569, the duchy was elevated to a Grand Duchy after territorial expansion. The Medicis ruled the Grand Duchy of Tuscany from its inception until 1737, with the death of Gian Gastone de' Medici. The Grand Duchy witnessed degrees of economic growth under the earlier Grand Dukes, but by the time of Cosimo III de' Medici, r. 1670–1723, Tuscany was fiscally bankrupt. The Medici's wealth and influence initially derived from the textile trade guided by the Wool Guild of Florence, the Arte della Lana. Like other families ruling in Italian signory, the Medicis dominated their city's government, were able to bring Florence under their family's power, and created an environment in which art and humanism could flourish. They, along with other families of Italy, such as the Visconti and Sforza in Milan, the Este in Ferrara, and the Gonzaga in Mantua, inspired and fostered the birth of the Italian Renaissance. The Medici Bank was one of the most prosperous and respected institutions in Europe. By some estimates, the Medici family was the wealthiest in Europe for a time. From this base, they acquired political power initially in Florence and later in wider Italy and Europe. They were among the earliest businesses to use the general ledger system of accounting, through the development of the double-entry bookkeeping system for tracking credits and debits. History edit. Origins edit. The Medici family came from the agricultural Mugello region, 3, north of Florence, and is mentioned for the first time in a document of 1230. 4. The origin of the name is uncertain. Medici is the plural of medico, meaning medical doctor. 5. It has been suggested that the name derived from one Medico di Patrone, a castellan of Patrone in the late 11th century, who may have been the family's ancestor. The dynasty began with the founding of the Medici Bank in Florence in 1397. Rise to power edit. Giovanni di Bisi de' Medici, founder of the Medici Bank. The confirmation of the rule, by Domenico Ghirlandaio. For most of the 13th century, the leading banking center in Italy was Siena. But in 1298, one of the leading banking families of Europe, the Bolsonarists, went bankrupt, and the city of Siena lost its status as the banking center of Italy to Florence. 6. Until the late 14th century, prior to the Medici, the leading family of Florence was the House of Albizzi. In 1293, the Ordinances of Justice were enacted. Effectively, they became the constitution of the Republic of Florence throughout the Italian Renaissance. 7. The city's numerous luxurious palazzi were becoming surrounded by townhouses built by the prospering merchant class. 8. The main challengers to the Albizzi family were the Medicis, first under Giovanni di Bisi de' Medici, later under his son Cosimo di Giovanni de' Medici and great-grandson, Lorenzo de' Medici. The Medici controlled the Medici Bank, then Europe's largest bank, and an array of other enterprises in Florence and elsewhere. In 1433, the Albizzi managed to have Cosimo exiled. 9. The next year, however, a pro-Medici Signoria, civic government, led by Tommaso Soderini, Stoldo Altaviti and Luca Pitti was elected and Cosimo returned. The Medici became the city's leading family, a position they would hold for the next 3 centuries. Florence remained a republic until 1537, traditionally marking the end of the High Renaissance in Florence, but the instruments of republican government were firmly under the control of the Medici and their allies, save during intervals after 1494 and 1527. Cosimo and Lorenzo rarely held official posts but were the unquestioned leaders. The Medici family was connected to most other elite families of the time through marriages of convenience, partnerships, or employment, so the family had a central position in the social network. Several families had systematic access to the rest of the elite families only through the Medici, perhaps similar to banking relationships. Some examples of these families include the Bardi, Altaviti, Ridolfi, Cavalcanti and the Tornabuoni. This has been suggested as a reason for the rise of the Medici family. 10. Members of the family rose to some prominence in the early 14th century in the wool trade, especially with France and Spain. Despite the presence of some Medici in the city's government institutions, they were still far less notable than other outstanding families such as the Albizzi or the Strozzi. One Salvestro de' Medici was Speaker of the Woolmakers' Guild during the Sciompi Revolt of 1378–82, and one Antonio de' Medici was exiled from Florence in 1396. 11. Involvement in another plot in 1400 caused all branches of the family to be banned from Florentine politics for 20 years, with the exception of 2. 15th century edit. Giovanni di Bisi de' Medici, circa 1360–1429, son of Everardo de' Medici, 1322–1363, increased the wealth of the family through his creation of the Medici Bank, and became one of the richest men in the city of Florence. Although he never held any political office, he gained strong popular support for the family through his support for the introduction of a proportional system of taxation. Giovanni's son Cosimo the Elder, Pater Patrii, father of the country, took over in 1434 as Grand Maestro, the unofficial head of the Florentine Republic. 12. Cosimo Pater Patrii, Uffizi Gallery, Florence. 3 successive generations of the Medici, Cosimo, Piero, and Lorenzo, ruled over Florence through the greater part of the 15th century. They clearly dominated Florentine representative government without abolishing it altogether. 13. These 3 members of the Medici family had great skills in the management of so restive and independent a city as Florence. When Lorenzo died in 1492, however, his son Piero proved quite incapable of responding successfully to challenges caused by the French invasion of Italy in 1492, and within 2 years, he and his supporters were forced into exile and replaced with a republican government. 13. Piero de' Medici, 1416–1469, Cosimo's son, stayed in power for only 5 years, 1464–1469. He was called Piero the Gouty because of the gout that afflicted his foot and eventually led to his death. Unlike his father, Piero had little interest in the arts. Due to his illness, he mostly stayed at home bedridden, and therefore did little to further the Medici control of Florence while in power. As such, Medici rule stagnated until the next generation, when Piero's son Lorenzo took over. Citation needed. Lorenzo de' Medici, 1449–1492, called the Magnificent, was more capable of leading and ruling a city, but he neglected the family banking business, which led to its ultimate ruin. To ensure the continuance of his family's success, Lorenzo planned his children's future careers for them. He groomed the headstrong Piero II to follow as his successor in civil leadership. Giovanni XIV, future Pope Leo X, was placed in the church at an early age, and his daughter Maddalena was provided with a sumptuous dowry to make a politically advantageous marriage to a son of Pope Innocent VIII that cemented the alliance between the Medici and the Roman branches of the Cibo and Altaviti families. 15. The Pazzi conspiracy of 1478 was an attempt to depose the Medici family by killing Lorenzo with his younger brother Giuliano during Easter services. The assassination attempt ended with the death of Giuliano and an injured Lorenzo. The conspiracy involved the Pazzi and Salviati families, both rival banking families seeking to end the influence of the Medici, as well as the priest presiding over the church services, the Archbishop of Pisa, and even Pope Sixtus IV to a degree. The conspirators approached Sixtus IV in the hopes of gaining his approval, as he and the Medici had a long rivalry themselves, but the Pope gave no official sanction to the plan. Despite his refusal of official approval, the Pope nonetheless allowed the plot to proceed without interfering, and, after the failed assassination of Lorenzo, also gave dispensation for crimes done in the service of the Church. After this, Lorenzo adopted his brother's illegitimate son Giulio de' Medici, 1478–1535, the future Pope Clement VII. Unfortunately, all of Lorenzo's careful planning fell apart to some degree under his incompetent son Piero II, who took over as the head of Florence after his father's death. Piero was responsible for the expulsion of the Medici from 1494 to 1512. The Medici additionally benefited from the discovery of vast deposits of alum and tolfa in 1461. Alum is essential as a mordant in the dyeing of certain cloths and was used extensively in Florence, where the main industry was textile manufacturing. However, the Turks were the only exporters of alum up to this time, so Europe was forced to buy from them until the discovery in tolfa. Pius II granted the Medici family a monopoly on the mining there, making them the primary producers of alum in Europe. In the dangerous circumstances in which our city is placed, the time for deliberation is past. Action must be taken. I have decided, with your approval, to sail for Naples immediately, believing that as I am the person against whom the activities of our enemies are chiefly directed, I may, perhaps, by delivering myself into their hands, be the means of restoring peace to our fellow citizens. As I have had more honor and responsibility among you than any private citizen has had in our day, I am more bound than any other person to serve our country, even at the risk of my life. With this intention I now go. Perhaps God wills that this war, which began in the blood of my brother and of myself, should be ended by any means. My desire is that by my life or my death, my misfortune or my prosperity, I may contribute to the welfare of our city. I go full of hope, praying to God to give me grace to perform what every citizen should at all times be ready to perform for his country. Lorenzo de' Medici, 1479. 16. 16th century edit. The exile of the Medici lasted until 1512, after which the senior branch of the family, those descended from Cosimo the Elder, were able to rule until the assassination of Alessandro de' Medici, 1st Duke of Florence, in 1537. This century-long rule was interrupted only on two occasions, between 1494 to 1512 and 1527 to 1530, when anti-Medici factions took control of Florence. Following the assassination of Duke Alessandro, power passed to the junior Medici branch, those descended from Lorenzo the Elder, the youngest son of Giovanni di Bisi, starting with his great-great-grandson Cosimo I the Great. Cosimo and his father started the Medici foundations in banking and manufacturing, including a form of franchises. The family's influence grew with its patronage of wealth, art, and culture. Ultimately, it reached its zenith in the papacy and continued to flourish for centuries afterward as Dukes of Florence and Tuscany. At least half, probably more, of Florence's people were employed by the Medici and their foundational branches in business. Medici Pope said it. The Medici became leaders of Christendom through their two famous 16th-century popes, Leo X and Clement VII. Both also served as de facto political rulers of Rome, Florence, and large swaths of Italy known as the Papal States. They were generous patrons of the arts who commissioned masterpieces such as Raphael's Transfiguration and Michelangelo's The Last Judgment. However, their reigns coincided with troubles for the Vatican, including Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation and the infamous sack of Rome in 1527. Leo X's fun-loving pontificate bankrupted Vatican coffers and accrued massive debts. At this time, the Salviati, Altoviti and Strozzi became the leading bankers of the Roman Curie. From Leo's election as Pope in 1513 to his death in 1521, Florence was overseen, in turn, by Giuliano de' Medici, Duke of Nemours, Lorenzo de' Medici, Duke of Urbino, and Giulio de' Medici, the latter of whom became Pope Clement VII. Clement VII's tumultuous pontificate was dominated by a rapid succession of political crises, many long in the making, that resulted in the sack of Rome by the armies of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V in 1527. From the time of Clement's election as Pope in 1523 until the sack of Rome, Florence was governed by the young Ippolito de' Medici, future Cardinal and Vice-Chancellor of the Holy Roman Church, Alessandro de' Medici, future Duke of Florence, and their guardians. In 1530, after allying himself with Charles V, Pope Clement VII succeeded in securing the engagement of Charles V's daughter Margaret of Austria to his illegitimate nephew, reputedly his son, Alessandro de' Medici. Clement also convinced Charles V to name Alessandro as Duke of Florence. Thus began the reign of Medici monarchs in Florence, which lasted 2 centuries. After securing Alessandro de' Medici's dukedom, Pope Clement VII married off his first cousin, twice removed, Catherine de' Medici, to the son of Emperor Charles V's archenemy, King Francis I of France, the future King Henry II. This led to the transfer of Medici blood, through Catherine's daughters, to the royal family of Spain through Elizabeth of Valois, and the House of Lorraine through Claude of Valois. In 1534, following a lengthy illness, Pope Clement VII died, and with him the stability of the Medici's senior branch. In 1535, Ippolito Cardinal de' Medici died under mysterious circumstances. In 1536, Alessandro de' Medici married Charles V's daughter, Margaret of Austria. However, the following year he was assassinated by a resentful cousin, Lorenzino de' Medici. The deaths of Alessandro and Ippolito enabled the Medici's junior branch to lead Florence. Medici Duke said it. The outstanding figure of the 16th-century Medici family was Cosimo I, who rose from relatively modest beginnings in the Mugello to attain supremacy over the whole of Tuscany. Against the opposition of Catherine de' Medici, Paul III and their allies, he prevailed in various battles to conquer Florence's hated rival Siena and found the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. Cosimo purchased a portion of the island of Elba from the Republic of Genoa and based the Tuscan navy there. He died in 1574, succeeded by his eldest surviving son Francesco, whose inability to produce male heirs led to the succession of his younger brother, Ferdinando, upon his death in 1587. Francesco married Johanna of Austria, and with his consort produced Eleonore de' Medici, Duchess of Mantua, and Marie de' Medici, Queen of France and Navarre. Through Marie, all succeeding French monarchs, bar the Napoleons, were descended from Francesco. Ferdinando eagerly assumed the government of Tuscany. He commanded the draining of the Tuscan marshlands, built a road network in southern Tuscany and cultivated trade in Livorno. 17. To augment the Tuscan silk industry, he oversaw the planting of mulberry trees along the major roads. Silkworms feed on mulberry leaves. 18. In foreign affairs, he shifted Tuscany away from Habsburg. 19. Hegemony by marrying the first non-Habsburg marriage candidate since Alessandro, Christina of Lorraine, a granddaughter of Catherine de' Medici. The Spanish reaction was to construct a citadel on their portion of the island of Elba. 17. To strengthen the new Franco-Tuscan alliance, he married his niece, Marie, to Henry IV of France. Henry explicitly stated that he would defend Tuscany from Spanish aggression, but later reneged, after which Ferdinando was forced to marry his heir, Cosimo, to Maria Maddalena of Austria to assuage Spain, where Maria Maddalena's sister Margaret was the incumbent queen consort. Ferdinando also sponsored a Tuscan expedition to the New World with the intention of establishing a Tuscan colony, an enterprise that brought no result for permanent colonial acquisitions. Despite all of these incentives to economic growth and prosperity, the population of Florence at the dawn of the 17th century was a mere 75,000, far smaller than the other capitals of Italy, Rome, Milan, Venice, Palermo, and Naples. 20. Francesco and Ferdinando, due to lax distinction between Medici and Tuscan state property, are thought to have been wealthier than their ancestor, Cosimo de' Medici, the founder of the dynasty. 21. The Grand Duke alone had the prerogative to exploit the state's mineral and salt resources, and the fortunes of the Medici were directly tied to the Tuscan economy. 17th century. Ferdinando, although no longer a cardinal, exercised much influence at successive conclaves. In 1605, Ferdinando succeeded in getting his candidate, Alessandro de' Medici, elected Pope Leo XI. He died the same month, but his successor, Pope Paul V, was also pro-Medici. 22. Ferdinando's pro-papal foreign policy, however, had drawbacks. Tuscany was overrun with religious orders, not all of whom were obliged to pay taxes. Ferdinando died in 1609, leaving an affluent realm. His inaction in international affairs, however, would have long-reaching consequences down the line. In France, Marie de' Medici was acting as regent for her son, Louis XIII. Louis repudiated her pro-Habsburg policy in 1617. She lived the rest of her life deprived of any political influence. Ferdinando's successor, Cosimo II, reigned for less than 12 years. He married Maria Maddalena of Austria, with whom he had his 8 children, including Margherita de' Medici, Ferdinando II de' Medici, and an Anna de' Medici. He is most remembered as the patron of astronomer Galileo Galilei, whose 1610 treatise, Sidereus Nuncius, was dedicated to him. 23. Cosimo died of consumption, tuberculosis, in 1621. 24. Cosimo's elder son, Ferdinando, was not yet of legal maturity to succeed him, thus Maria Maddalena and his grandmother, Christina of Lorraine, acted as regents. Their collective regency is known as the Tertici. Maria Madalena's temperament was analogous to Christina's, and together they aligned Tuscany with the papacy, redoubled the Tuscan clergy, and allowed the heresy trial of Galileo Galilei to occur. 25. Upon the death of the last Duke of Urbino, Francesco Maria II, instead of claiming the duchy for Ferdinando, who was married to the Duke of Urbino's granddaughter and heiress, Vittoria della Rovere, they permitted it to be annexed by Pope Urban VIII. In 1626, they banned any Tuscan subject from being educated outside the Grand Duchy, a law later overturned, but resurrected by Maria Maddalena's grandson, Cosimo III. 26. Harold Acton, an Anglo-Italian historian, ascribed the decline of Tuscany to the Tertici regency. 26. Grand Duke Ferdinando was obsessed with new technology, and had a variety of hygrometers, barometers, thermometers, and telescopes installed in the Palazzo Pitti. 27. In 1657, Leopoldo de' Medici, the Grand Duke's youngest brother, established the Accademia del Cimento, organized to attract scientists to Florence from all over Tuscany for mutual study. 28. Tuscany participated in the Wars of Castro, the last time Medici and Tuscany proper was involved in a conflict, and inflicted a defeat on the forces of Pope Urban VIII in 1643. 29. The war effort was costly and the treasury so empty because of it that when the Castro mercenaries were paid for, the state could no longer afford to pay interest on government bonds, with the result that the interest rate was lowered by 0.75%. 30. At that time, the economy was so decrepit that barter trade became prevalent in rural marketplaces. 29. Ferdinando died on May 23, 1670, afflicted by apoplexy and dropsy. He was interred in the Basilica of San Lorenzo, the Medici's necropolis. 31. At the time of his death, the population of the Grand Duchy was 730,594, the streets were lined with grass and the buildings on the verge of collapse in Pisa. 32. Ferdinando's marriage to Vittoria della Rovere produced two children, Cosimo III de' Medici, Grand Duke of Tuscany, and Francesco Maria de' Medici, Duke of Rovere and Montefeltro. Upon Vittoria's death in 1694, her allodial possessions, the duchies of Rovere and Montefeltro, passed to her younger son. 18th century. The fall of the dynasty. Cosimo III married Marguerite Louise d'Orleans, a granddaughter of Henry IV of France and Marie de' Medici. An exceedingly discontented pairing, this union produced three children, notably Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici, Electress Palatine, and the last Medici Grand Duke of Tuscany, Gian Gastone de' Medici. Johann Wilhelm, Elector Palatine, Anna Maria Luisa's spouse, successfully requisitioned the dignity Royal Highness for the Grand Duke and his family in 1691, despite the fact that they had no claim to any kingdom. 33. Cosimo frequently paid the Holy Roman Emperor, his nominal feudal overlord, exorbitant dues. 34. And he sent munitions to the emperor during the Battle of Vienna. The Medici lacked male heirs, and by 1705, the Grand Ducal treasury was virtually bankrupt. In comparison to the 17th century, the population of Florence declined by 50%, and the population of the Grand Duchy as a whole declined by an estimated 40%. 35. Cosimo desperately tried to reach a settlement with the European powers, but Tuscany's legal status was very complicated. The area of the Grand Duchy formerly comprising the Republic of Siena was technically a Spanish fief, while the territory of the old Republic of Florence was thought to be under imperial suzerainty. Upon the death of his first son, Cosimo contemplated restoring the Florentine Republic, either upon Anna Maria Luisa's death, or on his own, if he predeceased her. The restoration of the Republic would entail resigning Siena to the Holy Roman Empire, but, regardless, it was vehemently endorsed by his government. Europe largely ignored Cosimo's plan. Only Great Britain and the Dutch Republic gave any credence to it, and the plan ultimately died with Cosimo III in 1723. 36. On April 4, 1718, Great Britain, France and the Dutch Republic, also later, Austria, selected Don Carlos of Spain, the elder child of Elizabeth Farnese and Philip V of Spain, as the Tuscan heir. By 1722, the Electress was not even acknowledged as heiress, and Cosimo was reduced to spectator at the conferences for Tuscany's future. 37. On October 25, 1723, 6 days before his death, Grand Duke Cosimo disseminated a final proclamation commanding that Tuscany stay independent, and Maria Luisa would succeed uninhibited to Tuscany after Gian Gastone, and the Grand Duke reserved the right to choose his successor. However, these portions of his proclamation were completely ignored, and he died a few days later. Gian Gaston despised the Electress for engineering his catastrophic marriage to Anna Maria Francisca of Saxe-Lauenburg. While she abhorred her brother's liberal policies, he repealed all of his father's anti-Semitic statutes. Gian Gaston reveled in upsetting her. 38. On October 25, 1731, a Spanish detachment occupied Florence on behalf of Don Carlos, who disembarked in Tuscany in December of the same year. The Ruspenti, Gian Gaston's decrepit entourage, loathed the Electress, and she them. Duchess Violante of Bavaria, Gian Gaston's sister-in-law, tried to withdraw the Grand Duke from the sphere of influence of the Ruspenti by organizing banquets. His conduct at the banquets was less than regal. He often vomited repeatedly into his napkin, belched, and regaled those present with socially inappropriate jokes. 39. Following a sprained ankle in 1731, he remained confined to his bed for the rest of his life. The bed, often smelling of feces, was occasionally cleaned by Violante. In 1736, following the War of the Polish Succession, Don Carlos was disbarred from Tuscany, and Francis III of Lorraine was made heir in his stead. 40. In January 1737, the Spanish troops withdrew from Tuscany, and were replaced by Austrians. Gian Gaston died on July 9, 1737, surrounded by prelates and his sister. Anna Maria Luisa was offered a nominal regency by the Prince de Crane until the new Grand Duke could peregrinate to Tuscany, but declined. 41. Upon her brother's death, she received all the House of Medici's allotio possessions. Anna Maria Luisa signed the Patto di Famiglia, family pact, on October 31, 1737. In collaboration with the Holy Roman Emperor and Grand Duke Francis of Lorraine, she willed all the personal property of the Medici to the Tuscan state, provided that nothing was ever removed from Florence. 42. The Lorrainers, as the occupying forces were called, were popularly loathed, but the regent, the Prince de Crane, allowed the Electress to live unperturbed in the Palazzo Pitti. She occupied herself with financing and overseeing the construction of the Basilica of San Lorenzo, started in 1604 by Ferdinando I, at a cost to the state of 1,000 crowns per week. 43. The Electress donated much of her fortune to charity, £4,000 a month. 44. On February 19, 1743, she died, and the Grand Ducal line of the House of Medici died with her. The Florentines grieved her. 45, and she was interred in the crypt that she helped to complete, San Lorenzo. The extinction of the main Medici dynasty and the accession in 1737 of Francis Stephen, Duke of Lorraine and husband of Maria Theresa of Austria, led to Tuscany's temporary inclusion in the territories of the Austrian crown. The line of the princes of Ottajano, an extant branch of the House of Medici who were eligible to inherit the Grand Duchy of Tuscany when the last male of the senior branch died in 1737, could have carried on as Medici sovereigns but for the intervention of Europe's major powers, which allocated the sovereignty of Florence elsewhere. As a consequence, the Grand Duchy expired and the territory became a secundogeniture of the Habsburg-Lorraine dynasty. The first Grand Duke of the new dynasty, Francis I, was a great-great-great-grandson of Francesco I de' Medici, thus he continued the Medici dynasty on the throne of Tuscany through the female line. The Habsburgs were deposed in favor of the House of Bourbon-Parma in 1801, themselves deposed in 1807, but were later restored at the Congress of Vienna. Tuscany became a province of the United Kingdom of Italy in 1861. However, several extant branches of the House of Medici currently continue to exist, including the Princes of Ottajano, the Medici Tornacinci, and the Verona Medici Counts of Caprara and Gavardo. Legacy. The greatest accomplishments of the Medici were in the sponsorship of art and architecture, mainly early and high Renaissance art and architecture. The Medici were responsible for the majority of Florentine artworks created their period of rule. Their support was critical, since artists generally only began work on their projects after they had received commissions. Giovanni di Bisi de' Medici, the first patron of the arts in the family, aided Masaccio and commissioned Filippo Brunelleschi for the reconstruction of the Basilica of San Lorenzo, Florence, in 1419. Cosimo the Elder's notable artistic associates were Donatello and Francis Angelico. In later years, the most significant protégé of the Medici family was Michelangelo Buonarroti, 1475–1564, who produced work for a number of family members, beginning with Lorenzo the Magnificent, who was said to be extremely fond of the young Michelangelo and invited him to study the family collection of antique sculpture. 47. Lorenzo also served as patron to Leonardo da Vinci, 1452–1519, for 7 years. Indeed, Lorenzo was an artist in his own right and an author of poetry and song. His support of the arts and letters is seen as a high point in Medici patronage. After Lorenzo's death, the puritanical Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola rose to prominence, warning Florentines against excessive luxury. Under Savonarola's fanatical leadership, many great works were voluntarily destroyed in the bonfire of the Vanities, February 7, 1497. The following year, on May 23, 1498, Savonarola and 2 young supporters were burned at the stake in the Piazza della Signoria, the same location as his bonfire. In addition to commissions for art and architecture, the Medici were prolific collectors and today their acquisitions form the core of the Uffizi Museum in Florence. In architecture, the Medici were responsible for some notable features of Florence, including the Uffizi Gallery, the Boboli Gardens, the Belvedere, the Medici Chapel and the Palazzo Medici. 48. Later, in Rome, the Medici popes continued in the family tradition of patronizing artists in Rome. Pope Leo X would chiefly commission works from Raphael, whereas Pope Clement VII commissioned Michelangelo to paint the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel just before the pontiff's death in 1534. 49. Eleanor of Toledo, a princess of Spain and wife of Cosimo I the Great, purchased the Pitti Palace from Buonaccorso Pitti in 1550. Cosimo in turn patronized Vasari, who erected the Uffizi Gallery in 1560 and founded the Accademia dell'Arte del Disegno Academy of the Arts of Drawing, in 1563. 50. Marie de' Medici, widow of Henry IV of France and mother of Louis XIII, is the subject of a commissioned cycle of paintings known as the Marie de' Medici cycle, painted for the Luxembourg Palace by court painter Peter Paul Rubens in 1622–23. Although none of the Medici themselves were scientists, the family is well known to have been the patrons of the famous Galileo Galilei, who tutored multiple generations of Medici children and was an important figurehead for his patron's quest for power. Galileo's patronage was eventually abandoned by Ferdinando II, when the Inquisition accused Galileo of heresy. However, the Medici family did afford the scientist a safe haven for many years. Galileo named the 4 largest moons of Jupiter after 4 Medici children he tutored, although the names Galileo used are not the names currently used.
The Orsini family was one of the most celebrated princely families in medieval Italy and Renaissance Rome. Members of the Orsini include popes Celestine III, 1191–1198, Nicholas III, 1277–1280, Benedict XIII, 1724–1730, and numerous condottieri and other relevant political and religious figures. Origins. According to their family lore, the Orsini are descended from the Julio-Claudian family of ancient Rome. This is fanciful, as well as the alleged connection to the German families of Anhalt, Baden and Rosenberg sporting the same name. The Orsini also carried on a political feud with the Colonna family until by papal bull it was stopped in 1511. In 1571 the chiefs of both families married the nieces of Pope Sixtus V. The Orsini were related to the Borboni family existing in Rome in the 11th century. The first members had in fact always doubled surname of Borboni Orsini. This first known members is one Bobone, in the early 11th century, father of Pietro, in turn father of Giacinto de Borboni, 1110–1198, who in 1191 became Pope as Celestine III. One of the first great Nepotist popes, he created cardinals two of his nephews and allowed his cousin Giovanni Gaetano, Giangaetano, died 1232, to buy the fiefs of Vicovaro, Licenzo, Roccagiovine, and Nettuno, who formed the nucleus of the future territorial power of the family. The Borboni surname went lost with his children, who were called Didymofilia or Amerci. Two of them, Napoleon and Matteo Rosso the Great, 1178–1246, increased considerably the prestige of the family. The former was the founder of the first southern line, who disappeared with Camillo Pardo in 1553. He obtained the city of Manopolo, later a countship, and was papal gonfalonier. Matteo Rosso, called the Great, was the effective lord of Rome from 1241, when he defeated the imperial troops to 1243, holding the title of senator. Two of his sons and Napoleon were also senators. Matteo ousted the traditional rivals, the Colonna, from Rome and extended the Orsini territories southwards up to Avellino and northwards to Pitigliano. During his life the family entered firmly in the Guelph party. He had some 10 sons, which divided the fiefs after his deaths. Gentile, died 1246, originated the Pitigliano line and the second southern line. Rinaldo that of Monterito. Napoleon, died 1267, that of Bracciano and another Matteo Rosso that of Montegiordano, from the name of the district in Rome housing the family's fortress. The most distinguished of his sons was however Giovanni Gaetano, died 1280, elected pope as Nicholas III, he named the nephew Bertoldo, died 1289, as Count of Romagna and had two nephews and a brother created cardinals. The second southern line. The rise of the Orsini did not stop after Nicholas' death. Bertoldo's son, Gentile II, 1250–1318, was two-time senator of Rome, podest of Viterbo and, from 1314, Grand Justiciar, Great Justiciar, of the Kingdom of Naples. He married to Clarice Ruffo, daughter of the Counts of Catanzaro, forming an alliance of the most powerful Calabrian dynasty. His son Romano, 1268–1327, called Romanello, was royal vicar of Rome in 1326, and inherited the countship of Sonnet through his marriage with Anastase de Montfort. Romano's stance was markedly Guelph. After his death, his two sons divided his fiefs, forming the Pitigliano and the second southern line. Roberto, 1295–1345, Gentile II's elder son, married to Sibilla del Balzo, daughter of the great Senecal of the Kingdom of Naples. Among his sons, Giacomo, died 1379, was created cardinal by Gregory XI in 1371, while Nicola, August 27, 1331 February 14, 1399, obtained the counties of Ariano and Celano. The latter was also senator of Rome and enlarged the family territories in Lazio and Tuscany. His second son, Raimondo Orsini del Balzo, supported Charles III coup d'état in Naples against Queen Joan II. Under King Ladislas he was among the few Neapolitan feudatories who were able to maintain their territorial power after the royal war against them. However, at his death in 1406 the southern Orsini fiefs were confiscated. Relationships with the royal family remained cold under Joan II, however, when Raimundo's son Gian Antonio (1386–1453) sent his troops to help her against the usurpation attempt of James of Bourbon. He received in exchange the Principality of Taranto. The links with the court increased further under Ser Caracciolo, Joan's lover and great seneschal, a younger brother of Gian Antonio, one of Ser Gianni's daughters. However, the Orsini changed side when Alfonso V of Aragon started his conquest of the Kingdom of Naples. Gian Antonio was awarded with the Duchy of Bari, the position of Great Constable and an appanage of 100,000 ducati. Gian Antonio remained faithful to Alfonso's heir, Ferdinand I, but was killed during a revolt of nobles. Having died without legitimate sons, much of his were absorbed into the royal chamber. Pitigliano line. This line was initiated by Guido Orsini, second son of Romano, who inherited the county of Sona. He and his descendants ruled over the fiefs of Sona, Pitigliano, and Nola, but in the early 15th century wars against the Republic of Siena and the Colonnas caused the loss of several territories. Berthold II, died 1417, managed to keep only Pitigliano, while his grandson Orso, died July 5, 1479, was Count of Nola and fought as condottiero under the Duke of Milan and the Republic of Venice. Later he passed to the service of Ferdinand I of Naples, but, having not took part to the Baron's conjure, was rewarded with the fiefs of Ascoli and Atripalda. He took part to the Aragonese campaign in Tuscany and was killed in the siege of Viterbo. The most outstanding member of the Pitigliano line was Nicola, one of the major condottieri of the time. His son Ludovico, died January 27, 1534, and his nephew Enrico, died 1528, took part to the Italian wars at the service of both France and Spain, often changing side with the typicals of the Italian military leaders of the time. Two of Ludovico's daughters married two relevant figures, Geronima to Pier Luigi Farnese, illegitimate son of Pope Paul III, and Marza to Gian Giacomo Medici of Marignano, an important general of the Spanish army. The line started to decay after the loss of Nola by Ludovico, who was also forced to accept the Senese suzerainty over Pitigliano. Under his son Giovan Francesco, died May 8, 1567, the county entered in the orbit of the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Later, the attempt of Alessandro, died February 9, 1604, to obtain the title of Monteretto was thwarted by Pope Gregory XIII. His son Gian Antonio, March 25, 1569–1613, sold definitely Pitigliano to Tuscany, in exchange to the Marquisate of Monte San Savino. The line became extinct in 1640 with the death of Alessandro. Monteretto line. This line was founded by Rinaldo, third son of Matteo Rosso the Great. They were often involved in the baronial struggles of the late Middle Ages Rome, at least 3 members of the family being elected as senators, while others fought as condottieri. Francesco in 1370 took part to the War of Florence against the Visconti of Milan. Orso, died July 24, 1424, died fighting for the King of Naples in the Battle of Zaganora against the Milanese. His sons Giacomo, died 1482, and Lorenzo, 1452, battled for the Papal States, Naples, and Florence. One of Giacomo's daughters, Clarice, 1453 July 30, 1488, became Lorenzo de' Medici's wife. Francesco Orsini was created cardinal by Leo X in 1517. The most important member of the Monteretto Orsinis was Giovanni Battista Orsini, who became cardinal under Sixtus IV, 1483. He was probably among the promoters of the failed plot against Cesare Borgia in 1502, being assassinated as retaliation, together with numerous members of the family. The line decayed from the late 16th century, when several members were assassinated or lost their lands for various reasons. Its last representatives, Enrico, died September 12, 1643, and Francesco, 1592, September 21, 1650, sold the Monterito to the Barberini in 1641. The Tower of Raimondo Orsini. In Taranto, circa 1880. Bracciano line. Napoleon, another son of Matteo Rosa the Great, received Bracciano, Narola and other lands in what is now northern Lazio. In 1259 he was senator of Rome. Thanks to the strategic positions of their fiefs, and to their famous castle built in Bracciano in 1426, they were the most powerful Orsini line in the Lazio. Count Carlo, died after 1485, son of another Napoleon, died October 3, 1480, was papal Gonfaloniere. By his marriage with the Francesca Orsini of Monterito was born Gentile Virginio Orsini, one of the most irrelevant figures of Italian politics in the late 15th century. After Carlo's death, he enlarged the family's tenure with lands inherited by his wife, another Orsini from Salerno, and most of all he was amongst the favorites of Ferdinand I of Naples, who appointed him as Great Constable of Naples. Together with his cousin, the Cardinal Giovanni Battista, he was among the fiercest opposers of Popes Innocent VIII and Alexander VI. In 1492 Gentile Virginio bought the county of Angara from French Santo Sibo. During Charles VIII of France's descent into Italy, he managed to keep Bracciano by fighting without too much dogging against him. Ferdinand II had his fiefs confiscated and imprisoned him in Casteltellovo, where he was poisoned in 1497. The family recovered the setback under the more friendly Medici popes of the early 16th century. His son Giordano was prince assistant to the papal throne. His son Virginio was a famous admiral for the Papal States and France, but in 1539 he had his fiefs confiscated under the charge of treason. Paolo Giordano was created first Duke of Bracciano in 1560. An accomplished condottiero, he was however also a ruthless figure who had his wife Isabella de' Medici murdered. For this and other homicides he had to flee to northern Italy. He was succeeded by Virginio, whose heir Paolo Giordano II married the Princess of Piombino and was created Prince of the Holy Roman Empire. His brother Alessandro was cardinal and papal legate, and another brother, Ferdinando, died March 4, 1660, acquired the assets of the other line of San Gemini. In the 17th century the Dukes of Bracciano moved their residence to Rome. This, along with a general economical decadence, damaged the dukedom, and last Duke and Prince, Flavio, March 4, 1620. April 5, 1698, was forced by the huge debts to sell it to the Odescalchi and others. Gravina line. The line of Gravina, from the name of the eponymous city in Apulia, is the only existing line of the Orsini. It descends from Francesco, died 1456, a son of Count Carlo of Bracciano. Most of his fiefs were located in northern Lazio, but he entered in the Neapolitan orbit when in 1418 he was called by Ser Caracciolo to fight against the Angevine troops, which he defeated. By marriage, he obtained the title of Count of Gravina. He was made Duke of Gravina by King Alfonso, title definitely assigned to his son Giacomo, died 1472, to which had been added the counties of Conversano, Campagna, and Copertino. Two of Francesco's son, Marino, died 1471, and Giovanni Battista, died June 8, 1476, were respectively Archbishop of Trento and Grand Master of Knights of Rhodes. The fourth Duke, Francesco, was strangled by Cesare Borgia in 1503. One of his nephews, Flavio Orsini, was created cardinal in 1565. The fifth Duke, Ferdinando, died December 6, 1549, had all his fiefs confiscated by the Spaniards, but regained it after a 40,000 scudi payment. After the airless death of Duke Marshal Antonio, January 26, 1627, his lands passed to his cousin Pietro Orsini, Count of Moro Lucano, died 1641. The latter's nephew Pier Francesco, who had renounced the succession in favor to his brother Domenico to become a Dominican, was later elected pope with the name of Benedict XIII. His successor raised Benedict XIII's nephew, Prince Beroldo Orsini, to the dignity of Prince Assistant to the papal throne, title held until 1958, after the Emperor Charles VI had already, in 1724, made him a Prince of the Holy Roman Empire. The last cardinal from the family was Domenico. The family moved to Rome in the 18th century, where Duke Domenico, November 23, 1790, April 28, 1874, married Maria Luisa to Orlonia in 1823. In 1850 he was Minister of War and General Lieutenant of the Papal Armies, and Senator of Rome as well. The descendants of the family live in Rome, Torino, Singapore and in the United States. In the U.S. there are a few people with the last name Orsini. The name was changed when family members emigrated to the United States due to translation difficulties. Many members of the bloodline reside on the East Coast of the United States and some still maintain the proper Orsini name.
The Pallavicini family. The Pallavicini, Pallavicino, and in former times named Pallavicino, are an Italian noble family descended from Alberto I, died 1148. The first Pallavicino fief was created by Alberto II, who received it from Frederick Barbarossa in 1162. A number of lines descended from Guglielmo, died 1217, possessor of a series of fiefs between Parma and Piacenza and a descendant of the Lombard-Albertenga family, along with the Este, the Cavalcabo and Malaspina. They are the Pallavicini of the Latin Empire, descendants of Guglielmo through his sons Guy, also known as Galdo, and Rubino. The Pallavicini of Lombardy, the Pallavicini of Varano, the Pallavicini of Polsine, the Pallavicini of Busto, the Pallavicini of Raverano, today part of Calistano. The Pallavicini, Rospigliosi family of Tuscany and Rome. The Pallavicino of Sicily. A second main branch of the family, or perhaps a separate family, was formed by the descendants of Niccolò Pallavicini, alive in 1154, whose origins are doubtful. Probably he belonged to the Genoese patriciate, and whose links with the Alberni are uncertain. 1. The Pallavicini of Genoa. Patricians of Genoa. The Pallavicini of the Latin Empire edit. Through Guy and his brother Rubino, a branch of the family rose to prominence in the Latin Empire founded after the Fourth Crusade in 1204. They governed the Margraviate of Bodenitsa from 1204 to 1358. They grew in riches and, after 1224, became also the most powerful family in the former kingdom of Thessalonica, northern Greece. The first margraves were of Guy's line until his daughter Isabella died, at which time the line of Rubino inherited the throne. The Pallavicini were related to the De la Roche family then ruling in Athens. After the death of Albert in 1311 the Pallavicini influence slowly declined. The subsequent Zorzi margraves were matrilineal descendants of the last Pallavicini marquise, Guglielmo, the Pamphili family. Pamphili. Family history. The Pamphili surname originated in Gubbio and went to Rome under the pontificate of Pope Innocent VIII, 1484 to 1492. The peak of Pamphili power came with the election of Giovanni Battista Pamphili as Pope Innocent X, who reigned from 1644 to 1655. Like the reign of his predecessor Pope Urban VIII, of the equally papal Barberini family, Innocent X's rule was littered with examples of nepotism. Members of the Pamphili family members did exceptionally well from the Innocent X papacy. The following family members were created cardinals: Camillo Francesco Maria Pamphili, 1644, the Pope's nephew and son of Olimpia Maidalcini, the Pope's sister-in-law and close advisor. He later renounced his cardinalate to marry Olimpia Aldobrandini, widow of Paolo Borghese. Francesco Maidalcini, 1647, nephew of Olimpia Maidalcini. Camillo Astoli, 1650 as Camillo Astoli Pamphili, a cousin of Olimpia Maidalcini whom the Pope had adopted as the cardinal nephew. He was later deprived of this title for disloyalty to Innocent X. Benedetto Pamphili, son of Camillo Pamphili and Olimpia Aldobrandini, created cardinal by Innocent XI in 1681. Like other Italian noble families, the Pamphili bought property, palazzo or palaces and other estates, and created self-styled principalities. Family members regularly had princely titles bestowed upon them by family patriarchs or matriarchs. Olimpia Maidalcini received the honorific title of Princess of San Martino, effectively turning the small enclave of San Martino into a principality in its own right. After he left the cardinalate to marry, Camillo Pamphili was given the titles Prince of San Martino and Prince of Valmontone. He bought the Valmontone commune in 1634 from the Barberini family. Wars of Castro edit. Between 1639 and 1649, the Pamphili fought the Wars of Castro alongside the Barberini against the Farnese Dukes of Parma who controlled Castro and its surrounding territories. The conflict raged first under Barberini Pope Urban VIII and later under Pamphili Pope Innocent X. Pope Urban VIII died in 1644, only 2 months after a peace accord was signed between the papal families and the dukes. Pope Innocent X was elected to replace him. Innocent set about investigating some of the finances related to the conflict which had been administered by the Barberini. A number of Barberini family members were forced into exile but were later reconciled with the papacy and the Pamphili through the marriage of Maffeo Barberini, son of exiled Taddeo Barberini, and Olimpia Giustiniani, a niece of Pope Innocent X. On the orders of Innocent X, Castro was razed on September 2, 1649 by troops of the papal army and never rebuilt. Family property edit. Palazzo Pamphilj, by the architects Girolamo Rainaldi and Francesco Borromini, is located in the heart of Ryan Parian, south of the Church of Sant'Agnese in Agone in Piazza Navona, the Pamphili neighborhood of Rome, named for this reason Isola de Pamphili. From 1652, on Saturdays and Sundays in August, the piazza was turned into a lake to celebrate the Pamphili family, a festival that was suppressed in 1866. Today, the palace functions as the Brazilian embassy in Rome. The tomb of Innocent X is located in Sant'Agnese. In 1634 the Pamphilj bought the Baronio Palace in Valmontone, a town near Palestrina, outside Rome. Camillo Pamphili was determined to create a sort of new ideal city, so the palace and the main church were rebuilt and decorated by important Baroque artists, like the architect Mascia de Rossi, who rose to prominence under the mentorship of Bernini, and the painters Pier Francesco Mola, Gaspar Duguet, Guglielmo Cortese, Francesco Cozza, and Mascia Preti. Another building in central Rome is the Palazzo Doria Pamphilj, which houses the gallery of the same name.